In a forgotten drawer sealed within Windsor's East Wing, Prince Edward allegedly uncovers a velvet-bound envelope bearing the Queen Mother's crest, an envelope no royal had acknowledged in over 2 decades. What he found inside could redraw the lines of legacy and loyalty. The monarchy's most guarded inheritance document had not been honoured. And its intended recipient, not Charles, not Anne, but Catherine. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It had begun as a quiet personal inquiry, an innocuous dive into Windsor's archive rooms, perhaps spurred by nostalgia or something deeper. Prince Edward, always meticulous and reserved, had requested access to a private trove of his grandmother's documents housed under restricted protocols. No press, no aides, no cameras, just a solitary afternoon amid yellowed papers and fading seals. That's when his hand brushed against the unusual texture of velvet, a royal envelope unlike any other, thick with age but unmarked by time, stamped in red wax bearing the Queen Mother's personal cipher. It was labelled with chilling precision to be opened upon sovereign crisis. The year inscribed, 2001, just months before her death. And from the first moment he broke its seal, Edward knew he was holding something explosive. Inside lay a hidden codicil, a private addendum to the Queen Mother's already published will. But this one was never submitted to the Crown's legal registry, never reviewed by her official solicitors, never mentioned by her surviving children. It named no bank accounts, no properties, and no political instructions. What it did contain was far more intimate. To her who shall ascend beside the heir, it read, "I bequeath the personal items of sentimental and sovereign anchorage." The wording was deliberate, poetic, and undeniably strategic. The letter referenced a sealed collection, private treasures, many never seen by public eyes, which the Queen Mother had kept out of the royal collection, and designated instead for someone she saw as spiritually crucial to the monarchy's survival. And then came the name Catherine. For Edward, the implication was immediate and devastating. The Queen Mother had made this decision before Catherine even officially entered the royal sphere, before the engagement, before the wedding, before the Cambridge title, before the world had seen her as anything more than William's poised, steady companion. Yet here was written proof that the monarchy's matriarch saw something prophetic in her presence. A silent vote of confidence in the woman who would one day become the anchor of a fractured future. The deeper Edward read, the heavier the burden became. He knew what this meant if made public. The document could ignite tensions that had barely healed since Elizabeth II's passing. It could place Catherine at the centre of a constitutional debate she never asked for. It could call into question decisions made by Charles, trusted officials, and even Camilla. Yet hiding it would mean denying the dying wish of a woman who had held the monarchy together, through war, scandal, and abdication. Edward's hands trembled not from the discovery, but from the inevitable consequences that came next. But as the velvet envelope's secrets echo through the corridors of power, Edward is forced to make a choice: protect the crown's silence, or bring Catherine into an inheritance she never saw coming. Bound by the royal household's ironclad oath of secrecy, Edward stands at the edge of a decision that could destroy what's left of palace unity. As he weighs duty against justice, one name keeps resurfacing in his mind: Catherine. The woman the Queen Mother trusted in silence, while others plotted in full daylight. Alone in his private study, the weight of the velvet envelope seemed heavier than its material could justify. For days, Edward returned to its pages, rereading the Queen Mother's flowing script, searching for ambiguity that wasn't there. Every word was deliberate, every line drawn with precision. Yet the louder the Queen Mother's wishes echoed from the past, the more deafening became the silence around him. He was sworn by blood, by loyalty, by legacy not to stir what was laid to rest. But there was no peace in suppression, and Edward knew something insidious had taken root. A hidden clause, this significant, this intentionally buried, didn't vanish by accident. Someone had silenced the Queen Mother's final truth, and now the silence was his, to either uphold or shatter. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Edward turned to the one person whose instincts had never failed him, Princess Anne. Their conversation behind locked doors was tense, brittle with history. When he placed the letter in her hands, Anne didn't flinch. She simply nodded, as if a distant suspicion had finally stepped into the light. "I always believed there was something she left unfinished," she murmured, eyes locked on the paper. But Anne offered no command. "Only one warning. If you go further, you go alone." The Queen Mother had, in her final years, arranged curious visits, quiet moments with Catherine at Balmoral, disguised as casual hospitality. Edward remembered the hesitation in Catherine's eyes during those summers, as if she'd seen something but didn't dare speak it aloud. Now he understood. Catherine had been chosen in silence while the palace staged its public plans. And that silence had not been accidental, it had been engineered. The timing of the Queen Mother's sealed will was unsettling. Penned in 2001, yet hidden well into the reign of Elizabeth II. The matriarch had anticipated unrest. Her words, "sovereign crisis," carried a foresight that chilled Edward to the core. And yet, no record of this codicil had entered the Crown's legal archives. No solicitor had registered it. No executor had mentioned it. Was this mere oversight? Or had someone, perhaps multiple someones, deliberately suppressed it to preserve a vision of royal continuity that excluded Catherine entirely? Guilt began to seep into every decision Edward had once trusted. After Elizabeth's death, the nation was told that everything had been accounted for, every wish honoured. But here was irrefutable evidence that one voice, the Queen Mother's, had been ignored, silenced, or worse, hidden. Edward found himself questioning not only the system, but his own role in allowing it to persist. And so, a decision formed not with ceremony, but with conscience. He would not take it to Charles. He would not risk another silent burial. He would take it straight to the woman named in ink and intention. Catherine had a right to know what had been kept from her. But Catherine's reaction would not be what Edward expected. And what she does next begins a chain of revelations even she isn't prepared for. When Edward confronts Catherine with the Queen Mother's secret will, her silence is telling. What follows is a confession she had kept buried since university days, a personal visit to Balmoral, shrouded in secrecy, where the Queen Mother had whispered something extraordinary into her ear. The air between them thickened with the weight of revelation. As Edward laid the document before her, expecting disbelief or protest, Catherine merely stared. Her eyes didn't widen, they deepened, as if a memory she had locked away long ago had just stepped out of the shadows. "She told me," Catherine murmured, after a pause that stretched like centuries, "that one day I would hold more than just his hand." The sentence was not laced with vanity, but sorrow. Edward froze. He hadn't expected her to already know, but she did at least, part of it. What she hadn't known was that the Queen Mother's cryptic blessing had been more than symbolic. It had been legally sealed, recorded in writing, meant to alter the course of royal legacy, and it had never reached her until now. What unfolded next was a memory that Catherine had guarded for years. It was shortly after Diana's funeral, before William had formally resumed royal duties. Catherine had been quietly invited to Balmoral without cameras, without courtiers. The Queen Mother, then in her 90s, had requested her presence. At the time, Catherine thought it was a gesture of kindness, perhaps curiosity. But now she realised it had been something altogether different. In the quietude of the Highland estate, the Queen Mother had watched her, spoken with her not as an outsider, but as if testing a theory only she understood. She praised Catherine's calm, her discretion, her capacity to listen without flinching. It wasn't about charm. It was about endurance. It was about the kind of woman who could withstand storms without becoming one herself. Then came the moment that Catherine now struggled to describe. She had been led gently, wordlessly into a side chamber that held what the Queen Mother called her rosewood collection. A trove of items unaccounted for by curators, untouched by public catalogues. Wrapped boxes, handwritten letters, fragments of memory preserved not for display, but for legacy. "These are for one who guards the line, not carries it," the Queen Mother had said cryptically. And then, just as quickly, the chamber was closed, the moment swallowed by the next royal engagement. Catherine had never spoken of it again. There had been no evidence, no follow-up, no formal recognition. She doubted her memory for years. Perhaps it was just a gesture. Perhaps it had meant nothing. but now, seeing her name inked in the Queen Mother's hand, everything rearranged itself. The old woman hadn't just seen her as William's partner, she had seen her as something elemental to the monarchy's future, an anchor beyond lineage, beyond politics. And Catherine, while honoured, felt betrayed, not by the Queen Mother, but by the silence that followed. A heartbreak came not from the weight of inheritance, but from the realization that no one had believed she deserved to know. But before Catherine can make sense of her inheritance, the storm breaks. Charles is informed of Edward's move, and what follows shakes the monarchy's fragile trust to its core. What was whispered in private now erupts in fury. Charles summons Edward to Clarence House in a meeting so volatile, insiders say palace staff were asked to clear the corridors. At stake, the credibility of the sovereign, the chain of succession, and whether Edward has just handed power to Catherine without a crown. The walls trembled not from thunder but from the storm inside. Charles, once the careful mediator between tradition and change, stood at the edge of fury, his voice echoing down the marbled halls. "You risked the legacy for sentiment," he roared, slamming the letter onto the desk like a verdict. His face, not one of a brother betrayed, but of a monarch cornered. Edward didn't flinch. He had expected this rage, perhaps even welcomed it. He met his brother's fury with devastating calm. "I honoured her truth, something we've forgotten how to do," Edward replied, his tone sharper than any accusation, and in that moment, the old wounds between them reopened. This wasn't just about Catherine, this was about inheritance, about power, about whose version of royal truth would survive the test of exposure. What followed was less a conversation than a clash of worldviews. Charles demanded protocol, structure, hierarchy, the very laws that held the institution together. Edward, in turn, demanded integrity, reminding him that the Queen Mother's final wishes weren't a challenge to the throne, but a restoration of something the crown had lost: moral clarity. The Queen Mother's codicil, Edward argued, was not a constitutional threat, it was a spiritual correction. Yet Charles couldn't afford spiritual corrections. Not now. Not with a media storm always circling, not with a nation still adjusting to his reign. "You've handed her the kingdom without a crown," he snapped. "What message does that send?" To which Edward responded, "It sends the one you should have sent years ago, that honour still means something in this house." Midway through the confrontation, Anne entered, summoned by neither, but informed by both. Her presence was neither alliance nor opposition. She stood between them, not to mediate, but to observe. She said little, but her silence was damning. She did not defend Edward, nor did she comfort Charles. Her expression said what words could not. The Queen Mother's shadow still ruled this family more than any sovereign could. And in that silence, Charles saw something he feared even more than public scandal: internal fracture. If Anne refused to refute Edward, the court would begin to fracture behind closed doors. Charles's panic deepened, not from what Edward had done, but from what others might now believe. If the public learned of a second will, of secret heirlooms passed to Catherine in private chambers, of prophetic letters that positioned her as the true stabilizer of the monarchy, it could unravel the fragile confidence he had spent his life rebuilding. But Edward was unrelenting. "You fear the people seeing too much," he said softly. "But if you silence this again, it won't be her that weakens the monarchy, it'll be you." That truth hung in the room like smoke. For Charles it was a dagger. For Edward it was an oath fulfilled. But while the brothers clash in shadows, another force is moving, someone with more to lose than either of them, if this secret becomes public. Camilla, long seen as the gatekeeper of Charles's inner court, is reportedly blindsided. But her immediate concern isn't the will, it's what's listed in it. A collection of personal treasures from the Queen Mother's private vault that she had long assumed were hers. And one artifact in particular has her calling in legal counsel. The moment the codicil surfaced, quiet panic began to ripple through the Queen Consort circle. Camilla's private secretary flagged a concerning development: Edward had accessed sealed documentation under archival authority, and submitted a request to the Royal Collection Trust to confirm the items referenced in what was now being called the Rosewood Codicil. The request wasn't vague. It was exact. A list of heirlooms categorized under a phrase not seen in any prior inventory, the Rosewood designation. For years, Camilla had believed those particular pieces were absorbed into the Crown's collection by default, given their undocumented status. But now it appeared the Queen Mother had deliberately kept them separate, naming them as personal, not institutional, and worse, she had named Catherine as their recipient. The internal tension spiked when Camilla requested a file from the Trust archives and came face to face with the truth. The Rosewood designation was not folklore. It existed and was referenced in a set of hand-typed entries dated over 30 years ago, quietly kept off digital records. The items were shocking in both value and symbolism. Queen Victoria's brooch of mourning, long thought lost, a private emerald tiara never seen since George VI's reign, and, most cryptic of all, a locked diary, identified only as EM 1940 to 1950, the Queen Mother's initials and wartime years. Camilla knew immediately if these items were given to Catherine, it wouldn't just be an inheritance, it would be a coronation in all but name. In a move that sent palace legal advisors scrambling, Camilla attempted to block the retrieval of the items, invoking a little-used clause labelled Senior Spousal Privilege. She argued that as Queen Consort and primary living successor to the Queen Mother's generational position, she had rightful authority to contest the movement of high-value regalia. But the legal office, now under unprecedented scrutiny after Edward's revelation, stood firm. The Queen Mother had named Catherine specifically, and Edward, acting with archival oversight and temporary authority, granted through a technical clause embedded in the late Elizabeth II's estate directives, had already moved to secure the collection. Camilla's appeal was rejected. Her fury was immediate and unrestrained. "This is a coup in pearls and parchment," she allegedly declared behind closed doors. Not since the early days of Diana's elevation had Camilla felt so sidelined, so exposed. The Queen Mother, in her final act, had bypassed her entirely, not out of malice but of deliberate vision, and that, to Camilla, was far more dangerous. This wasn't just about jewels, it was about legitimacy, about optics, about legacy. And if the public discovered that she had once believed these items were hers, only to be denied them in favour of Catherine, whose public image already dwarfed her own, the damage would be irrevocable. But even Camilla's outrage can't stop what happens next when Catherine is summoned to a hidden chamber beneath Windsor to receive the legacy in silence. Beneath the ancient stones of Windsor Castle lies a room few even know exists, a royal vault, sealed not with locks, but tradition. Here, under the escort of Edward and an archivist bound by secrecy, Catherine is brought to the chamber of the Queen Mother's final trust, and what awaits her defies all royal protocol. The silence that followed Camilla's failed attempt to block the transfer of the Rosewood collection was brief. Within hours, Edward moved swiftly, invoking a clause buried in a 1961 archival directive that allowed him, as a direct male descendant of the Queen Mother, to request one-time ceremonial access to the sovereign's hold a sealed chamber beneath Windsor Castle reserved for only the most sacred royal deposits. Catherine had not been informed of the location until the very hour it was to happen. A call from Edward, calm but heavy, "It's time. You must come quietly." What followed was not a royal procession but a silent walk through narrow, centuries-old corridors beneath the castle. Catherine did not ask questions. She already knew this would not be a viewing. It would be a reckoning. Waiting in the chamber were only two figures, Lady Alexandra, one of the last living confidants of the Queen Mother, and the royal chaplain, who bore the ancient oath of custodianship for items too sacred to ever be displayed. Before her stood a single wooden chest, worn with time but sealed with the unmistakable insignia of Elizabeth Angela Marguerite Bowes-Lyon, the Queen Mother's royal cipher. Edward said nothing as the seal was lifted. The silence was deliberate, the weight of history concentrated in a room designed not to impress, but to preserve. Catherine stepped forward, and what lay inside took her breath in a way no crown ever had. Each item was wrapped in cloth, hand-stitched with rose motifs. One by one, they were revealed. Queen Victoria's mourning brooch, tucked alongside a handwritten note that simply read "to shield strength with sorrow." A pair of emerald earrings believed lost since the abdication crisis. But it was the final object, the smallest, most unassuming, that drew the breath from the room. A diary, bound in faded burgundy leather. Its cover, initialed EM, tucked inside, was a passage dated March 1943. "She who loves the people, not just the crown, shall wear this. Not because she is told to, but because she was born not of rank but of grace." And beneath that line, wrapped in deep velvet, the Queen Mother's private coronation tiara. It had not been seen since her 1937 tour. Hidden from photographers, guarded from catalogues, reserved, it seemed, for this very moment. Catherine did not cry. She simply touched the note, then looked to Lady Alexandra. No words were spoken, but the meaning was clear. This was not inheritance. This was anointment. Not in ceremony, but in spirit. Not for what she had married into, but for what she had carried silently for years. It was a declaration that had waited in silence for the right moment and the right woman. But just as Catherine begins to grasp the symbolic weight of this inheritance, news leaks and the press descends like a tempest. A single anonymous tip, likely from inside the palace, ignites a media wildfire. Headlines scream of betrayal, secret wills, and Catherine's midnight inheritance. As the monarchy scrambles to control the narrative, it becomes clear someone wants to destroy Catherine's ascendance before it begins. The silence that once protected the Queen Mother's final trust is shattered overnight. A tabloid based in Madrid runs an exclusive under the explosive headline, "Hidden Will Leaves Crown Jewels to Commoner." The piece is laced with half-truths and deliberate distortions, but the damage is instant. By dawn, Catherine's face floods every news channel and front page. The new Queen Mother? They ask with breathless speculation. From breakfast tables in Britain to embassy halls abroad, the question spreads like a crack through the monarchy's public facade. Edward's clandestine actions are now international scandal. Catherine's private midnight inheritance becomes the subject of round-the-clock commentary. And the crown? Silent, panicked, and scrambling for control, Charles, furious and blindsided, imposes an immediate media blackout across all palace press offices. A full-scale internal investigation is launched to identify the source of the leak, but trust within the palace collapses quickly. Eyes turn inward. Loyalty fractures. Even senior aides begin whispering theories. Was it Edward, a member of Camilla's camp, or someone buried deep within the royal machinery who stood to lose everything from Catherine's rise? No name is spoken aloud, but the air turns poisonous. In the middle of it all, Camilla makes a move no one expected. Days after the leak, she appears in public for a royal engagement wearing the Queen Mother's old tartan shawl, an heirloom she had long claimed held sentimental value. The timing is no coincidence. It's not a statement, it's a warning. The symbolism isn't lost on the press. Was Camilla asserting her lineage, sending a signal to her loyalists, or staking her own silent claim in the battle for narrative? Whatever the intent, the impact is immediate. Public opinion turns volatile. Some view Catherine as a victim, an innocent drawn into a generational war she never asked for. Others accuse her of orchestrating a quiet power grab, using the Queen Mother's legacy as a tool of silent domination. Social media erupts with theories, timelines, decoded jewelry sightings, and archival photos. The mystique surrounding Catherine only grows. And still she says nothing. Her refusal to speak becomes a strategy in itself. The silence is neither submission nor surrender. It is presence. It is control. It fuels the intrigue, the reverence, the speculation. Every word unspoken becomes louder than any press release. And yet, within the palace walls, that silence becomes dangerous. Without clarification, without endorsement, without denial, the narrative spins wildly, every faction grasping for their version of truth, of legacy, of victory. But amid the chaos, a single interview changes everything when Princess Alexandra, once silent, steps forward with a truth only she could verify. In an unprecedented moment, the reclusive Princess Alexandra grants a rare interview on the BBC, live. And what she reveals doesn't just validate the will, it elevates Catherine to a spiritual successor. The Queen Mother, it seems, foresaw a second Elizabeth, and she chose her with care. The nation holds its breath as Alexandra, poised and composed but visibly solemn, steps into the spotlight after decades of silence. She does not speak with flair or sentiment. She speaks with the weight of memory, of knowing too much for too long. Her voice cuts through speculation like a sword through fog. "I was there," she begins, in her final weeks. She spoke of the crown not as power, but as burden. She feared what her descendants might do to it, what they might forget. And then, with deliberate cadence, she quotes the Queen Mother's chilling foresight. "She's not born of us, but she will carry us." The meaning is clear. Catherine was not chosen by bloodline. She was chosen by belief. Alexandra recounts those last intimate conversations in the Queen Mother's drawing room, where age had sharpened insight rather than dulled it. There had been concern, deep concern, that the monarchy might one day fracture from within, not from Republicans, but from its own indifference to legacy. The Queen Mother, sensing a potential descent into vanity and entitlement, had anchored her trust in someone beyond the line of succession. Someone who reminded her of a young Elizabeth, not in name or station, but in purpose. Alexandra confesses that she had known about the codicil, that it was never intended for Charles to see. By design, she says, it was held back. She feared it would be buried, destroyed, or politicized. Those words send a tremor through the establishment. The impact is immediate. Public sentiment, once muddied by tabloids and whispers, begins to shift. Social media becomes a battleground of loyalty and truth. Supporters of Catherine flood the platforms with renewed fervor. Editorials call for transparency. Scholars unearth parallels between Elizabeth I and Catherine's composed rise amid chaos. And in a stunning reversal, columnists who once questioned Catherine's silence now praise her restraint. Across cities, a quiet chant begins to echo, the people's queen in all but title. Even those unmoved by monarchy cannot deny the power of a woman who was chosen not for her rank, but for her readiness. Within the palace, however, silence remains. Charles offers no rebuttal. Camilla makes no further appearances. William, for the first time, refrains from shielding or speaking for his wife. The Crown Chamber, a rarely convened inner council of royal historians, constitutional experts, and senior family members, prepares for an emergency session behind locked doors. Officially, it is called a review. Unofficially, it is a reckoning. They are not debating whether Catherine should be honoured. They are debating how. As the walls close in, the family faces a reckoning, and one final item in the Queen Mother's legacy has yet to be revealed. Tucked within a velvet pouch at the base of the Queen Mother's chest lies a final envelope marked only to be given upon ascendance. Inside, a letter written in 2001 that may be the most prophetic royal document since Elizabeth I. Its contents? A directive so intimate, so precise, that Catherine's path can no longer be denied. The room was silent, yet every eye in it felt the tremor of history bending in real time. As Edward reached beneath the final layer of preserved cloth inside the Queen Mother's chest, he retrieved a pouch stitched with gold thread and sealed with a wax imprint no one had seen in over 2 decades. The envelope inside was unmarked, save for 6 words, to be given upon ascendance. There was no title, no date stamp. Just the Queen Mother's unmistakable script, and a presence that seemed to still the air around it. Catherine stood frozen, her hands clasped not in fear, but in reverence. Edward opened the letter slowly and read aloud, though his voice cracked under the weight of its contents. The words inside were not ceremonial. They were not guarded or strategic. They were personal. The Queen Mother referred to Catherine not by her title nor her lineage, but by the role she was born to fulfill. Heir protector, not by blood, but by spirit. She wrote of the trials Catherine would face, those who will betray you under banners of loyalty, a storm of press that seeks to crown you only to crucify you, and a house divided that only you shall make whole again. Each line, written in 2001, seemed drawn from the very script of Catherine's present. It was as if the Queen Mother had not written a letter, but a prophecy. But there was more. Tucked inside the letter was a final bequeathment, the lion rampant brooch, a symbol of Scottish sovereignty historically withheld from all but the most senior monarchs and spiritual guardians of the crown. The Queen Mother had worn it only once during a secret wartime visit to Edinburgh. Now it was to be Catherine's, a symbol not of conquest but of custodianship. That evening, with only immediate family present, Edward placed the brooch into Catherine's hands. It was not a coronation. It was something older, quieter, and far more powerful, a transference of belief. William said nothing. He didn't need to. The look between them said it all. A chapter had ended, and another had begun. By morning, Windsor had changed. Camilla, without statement or farewell, left the residence before sunrise. Her staff gave no comment. Her absence was not official, but it was final. She had read the letter. She had seen the brooch. She knew the Queen Mother's legacy had passed her by, and to contest it now would be to ignite a battle she could no longer win. Days later, at an education summit in Birmingham, Catherine appeared before the cameras, composed, poised, and unshakable. Pinned to her collar, just beneath her poppy, was the lion rampant brooch. The press said nothing at first, but the message was unmistakable. This was not rebellion, this was revelation. A woman not crowned by power, but by purpose. And now, the monarchy waits not for approval, but for recognition. Because when history chooses its heirs, it rarely asks for permission. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.